Welcome to the Legacy Radio Network. This is the Everything Financial Radio Show, and I'm your host, Dennis Tubbergen. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. If you're a new listener, thanks for checking us out. We are here every week at this time. Glad you joined us, and we have a terrific show lined up for you. Former economic advisor to President Reagan, prolific author, Professor Laurence Kotlikoff will be stopping by today. We'll get his take on what's going on in Washington with the fiscal cliff. How will this play out? How might it affect you and your money? We will talk to the professor about that. Also, International Monetary Fund Director Christine Lagarde was shaking her finger at U.S. politicians this past week, saying, when it comes to the fiscal cliff, don't put a Band-Aid on it again. Don't kick the can down the road again. But I'll give you my view. I think that's exactly what they're going to do, and we'll talk about how it might affect you and your money. Also, in this economic recovery, we'll examine employment. Interestingly, if you're between the ages of 16 and 54, since the economic downturn began, your age group has lost jobs. The only age group that has seen employment increase are those aged 55 plus. I've got some statistics I'll share with you today that I think you'll find very interesting. Also, we'll talk a bit in our last segment in today's program, our personal finance segment. Should you pay down your mortgage or should you contribute to a retirement plan? Every household has a limited amount of income, assuming you have a written spending plan, a budget that you're working with every month, and you've got some excess or discretionary income, and you have built up some reserves, and we'll talk about how much you should have in reserves as well in the last segment of today's program. Should you save for retirement or should you pay down your mortgage? Well, there are a lot of get-out-of-debt advocates out there that will give you advice. One in particular that says, contribute to a retirement account before you pay down your home mortgage. I'm going to share with you in the last segment why I believe that is bad, even dangerous advice. I'll share with you some historic returns. And a quick reminder, if you'd like to listen to any of our past radio shows, you can go to iTunes, and you can go to the iTunes store and search under Everything Financial Radio, and you can download these to your iPod if you'd like. Also, you could go to everythingfinancialradio.com. You could click the link that says Listen to Past Shows and select any show in the past that you would like to listen to or download. I am pleased to have back on the Everything Financial Radio Show with me Professor Laurence Kotlikoff. Professor Kotlikoff has been a past guest on the program. He is a professor of economics at Boston University. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and president of Economic Security Planning, Inc., which produces acclaimed financial planning software. Professor Kotlikoff earned his Ph.D. in economics at Harvard. Before joining Boston University, he served on the faculties of UCLA and Yale, and with the President's Council of Economic Advisors, I believe under President Reagan. He can correct me if I'm wrong. He consults for governments, international organizations, and corporations, and is the author or co-author of 12 previous books. You may see Professor Kotlikoff's articles on personal finance and economics routinely in the nation's top papers and magazines. And Professor, welcome back. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Dennis.
Professor, just this week, you wrote a commentary titled The Hysterical Economy, having to do with the way businesses and individuals may react to this fiscal cliff. First, for the benefit of our listeners, define what the fiscal cliff is, and then comment on something that you wrote in that commentary, and I'm quoting, "Our economy is crazy enough. We don't need hysterical leaders to drive it further nuts."
The fiscal cliff is this proposition that cutting the deficit from 7% of GDP, which is a big number, very big number, down to 3% of GDP, which is where it was for most of the post-war, 3% or less, is going to kill the economy starting January 1st. Now, the economy wasn't killed over the years when we run a deficit that size, and there's no real intrinsic reason to believe this is going to happen now, except that when you have all the politicians and the press and most economists out there claiming that this is going to kill the economy, what are you going to do if you're an employer? Are you going to sit back and wait for your customers to disappear, or are you going to start to fire them, start to lay off workers now, or at least not hire people? You're going to do that. You're going to kind of get a leg up. And if you do it, then all the other employers are going to do it too because they're the same as you. And sure enough, your presumption that you're not going to have as many customers is going to come true because the other people that were laid off by the other employers were your customers, and the people that you laid off were the other people's customers. So what I'm trying to say here is that coordinating everybody on terrible times, which is what the President and members of Congress are doing and the press and so forth, and Ben Bernanke, is just a crazy, crazy thing to do with an economy that is very much coordinated by confidence. So what we're doing is we're talking ourselves into a recession, which may have nothing to do with the actual fiscal adjustments per se. The other thing to say, and I'll let you guys jump in, is that we actually need to be running not a 3% of GDP deficit, but a 5 to 7% of GDP surplus right now. Our country is completely broke. We have enormous obligations coming through time. The baby boomers are going to be getting $40,000 per head when they're fully retired in today's dollars. There's 78 million of us. The bills are astronomical that our kids are going to face, and here we are running enormous deficits. So we're either at economic war with our children or we just don't understand it.
Well, Professor, let me pick up on that because the last time you were on the program, you stated, and I believe these numbers are correct. I'm going to state them as I have them in my notes, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You stated that the U.S. faces a fiscal gap of $211 trillion, and I believe you stated that we'd have to raise federal tax or every federal tax immediately and permanently by 64% or cut all non-interest spending by the government. That includes Medicare, Social Security, by 40%, all immediately. Now, these fiscal cliff discussions aren't coming close to these numbers. So given that you just stated we need to run a 5 to 7% of GDP surplus to prepare for actually paying for promises that we've made, what's your prediction as to how this fiscal cliff issue is resolved by the Washington politicians? Will we finally see some longer-term solutions, or is there just going to be more of the kicking the proverbial can down the road?
Well, the fiscal cliff is actually $222 trillion now, $222 trillion. Last time I talked to you was $211 trillion. It grew by $11 trillion in 1 year. And just to put that in perspective, $11 trillion is the size of our official debt that's in the hands of the public. So we're looking, in focusing on the official debt, we're missing all these off-the-books liabilities, obligations, which are massive compared to the official debt. So our real problem is not the official debt, which is what the politicians are looking at. It's all the Social Security benefits, all the Medicare, Medicaid, defense spending, all these things that are projected into the future, less all the taxes that are projected. And the difference, again, is $222 trillion measured in present value. Now, will the politicians actually even reduce the deficit from 7% of GDP down to 3% of GDP? Most likely they won't because they're focused on scaring each other and scaring the economy, and now they've got a crisis, and it's very convenient. Those people that don't want to see the spending by the federal government cut are going to get their way. Those people that don't want to see their taxes raised as much as they should be raised will get their way. And all these people are older people, and the people that will not get their way are today's kids and our unborn fellow Americans who have no say whatsoever in this entire discussion and whose interests are not being represented. So we have politicians who are not economists who are turning a non-crisis into a crisis. But the history of our country in the post-war is always when we try and get close to doing something conscientious for our children, something responsible, something adult to keep them from being buried by our bills, we come up with some excuse for not doing it. We always do too little, too late. If you look at Social Security today, President Obama said that all it needs is to be tweaked. He said that in the debate with Governor Romney. And by the way, I'm not a Republican or Democrat, so I'm going to pick on the president because he's the president. Okay, if it were Romney, I'd be picking on Romney if he were the president right now, or the president-elect. But President Obama said in the debate that all it needs is to be tweaked. Well, all he has to do is look at Table 4B6 in the trustees' report of the Social Security Administration, and the trustees are people that he appointed, and even the trustees didn't even apparently look at this table because it shows that the system is 31% underfinanced, that it has a $21 trillion fiscal gap just on its own terms. So Social Security needs a 4 cent out of every dollar tax hike just to maintain the benefit payments through times that it's promised. It's in terrible shape. It's in worse shape than when Greenspan and his fellow politicians supposedly fixed it back in 1983. And that's because they only looked out 75 years. It sounds like a long time to look, but we're now 29 years beyond when they looked. In other words, we're looking at 29 years in the current 75-year window that they ignored. And as a consequence, we're in worse shape than we were back then in terms of that program.
Well, we're going to pick this conversation up with Professor Laurence Kotlikoff in the next segment. It's amazing how fast 8.5 minutes goes by. We have more questions for Professor Kotlikoff, and we will ask them of him when Everything Financial Radio returns here on the Legacy Radio Network. Stay with us.